This is the Planning Committee for the 25th of August. Can we get a roll call, please?
Good morning. Vice Chair Ranjiv Kush,
Here.
Director Diana Mayer,
Here.
Director Jed Smith,
Here.
Chair Larry Russell.
Here. I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments on the agenda?
There are none.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Kush,
Aye.
Director Mayer,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Chair Russell.
Aye. Public comment on non-agenda matters?
Yes, Mr. Phil Sauter, please.
Good morning. I wanted to comment. There's an item later in the agenda which I'm not commenting on now, but will do my best to comment on it when it comes up. It's one I've been looking forward to for over a year and was scanning the district's website since last Tuesday when it was announced as an agenda item. Unfortunately, that scanning didn't pay off until about 5:30 yesterday afternoon when the presentation was posted to the district website. I asked Terry earlier and she said she got the presentation earlier, but it didn't show up on the website until 5:30, which gave me an hour last night to go through the presentation and try to put facts and figures into context and get my thoughts ready for this morning. And also, I think the window for written comments closed at 24 hours before now, which was 9:30 yesterday morning. So some people might not be able to get their comments in at all. So my request going forward is to ask the board to consider if public input is of use to the board and its committees, and if so, consider posting meeting materials 48 hours before the scheduled meeting. That gives the public a day to review the materials and get comments together and still be able to meet the written comment cutoff window. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no further comments.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of July 28th.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Vice Chair Kush,
Aye.
Director Mayer,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Chair Russell.
Aye. Okay, water efficiency. Looking forward to this one.
Good morning, Chair Russell, members of the board and committee. Paul Cellier, Water Resources Director, with Carrie Pollard, our Manager of Water Efficiency. We have a sort of a companion presentation for you today to one that we did several months ago on residential water use. So I'm going to turn it over to Carrie and she'll walk us through the commercial and industrial water use and trends.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. All right. So jumping right into our CII water use trends, our CII commercial, industrial, institutional, just so I don't have to say them all over and over again. We'll start with an overview. CII water use accounts for 19% of our overall water use, which is 3,800 acre feet. This was for 2025. Of course, it somewhat fluctuates, but it's pretty consistently about 20%. We're going to talk about the state designated classifications that they are requiring us to utilize for assigning each of our CII accounts into these 22 classifications. And we'll talk about why they're doing that. We'll also go through the subcategories that we added, just recognizing that their 22 categories are not refined enough for us to actually make good use of this data. And so we wanted to kind of take it a step further while we were going through the process, and then wrap up with next steps. So of course, all the work we do is couched within our water efficiency master plan strategies. And the one we're really focusing on today is this technology and analysis. Of course, the lower right-hand corner, supporting our customers, is always, you know, tucked away in there somewhere as we implement programs and do determine what our next steps are. All right, so looking at commercial, industrial, and institutional trends. So the state assigned these 22 CII classifications as part of the Making Conservation a California Way of Life regulation. And if you look at them, you'll say, why do we have the Energy Star portfolio manager up there? And that's because the state leaned on the energy folks who have already established this categorization for commercial, industrial, and institutional accounts into these 18 WaterStar portfolio managers. So any business within this that's a certain square footage has to report their energy use to the state. So it was already kind of an established metric or categories methodology. But the water board said, well, those are very energy focused. And if you look at how they broke them down, they really are. So they added some water focused items. So the CII laundries, car wash, water recreation, and dedicated irrigation meters. So ultimately, every water utility will have to go through this process of assigning to these 22 categories, and then the state will develop KPIs for them. And if you look at them, some of them are really broad, right? So food service, food service, right? So what is that? Is it a restaurant? Is it a drive-through? Is it a sit-down? Is it a grocery store? Is it a donut shop? The range in water use for those categories is vast. Similarly, the entertainment category includes things like athletic clubs and bars that don't serve food, right? Very different water use. So that's why we really dug in and did the additional classifications as well. So now let's look at those 22 classifications. The highest use categories are shown here with lodging, residential, food sales and service, healthcare and education. And also the associated acre feet from 2025 for each of those groupings. What we did is evaluate the top 25 users within each of those categories. And as I mentioned, those subcategories classifications became really important, and we'll go through a handful of those as well. And we calculated kind of as our initial look, where should we be focusing? But as we did this, we realized that just looking at water use doesn't mean they're inefficient, right? And I'll show some examples of that as we kind of move through the each of these kind of top 4 categories. So then starting with lodging, residential, the subclassifications, you can see what our subclassifications are. So we included the prison here in lodging and residential. It may seem not quite intuitive. It could be public service, perhaps. Although when you think of the water use, it more closely aligns with assisted living or institutional residential, hotel, motel, that kind of thing. But for looking at our top 25% user range, we took out San Quentin because you can see there it's 50% of the use within this classification. And when we look at the low end of these users, that was on apartment laundries, right? So we had classified, one of our subclassifications was apartment laundries. They're only using 0.4 acre feet, those top 25% users. And then the highest bracket here is actually houseboats, interestingly enough, even though houseboats only account for 4.41% of the use within this category. Their highest percentile, the top 25% users, use more than the top 25% of hotel motels. So we think about that subclassification and what metrics we should be using. We can look at hotel motels and we can use AI and ask, chat or Copilot or whoever we prefer, how many hotels rooms are in this list of hotels, and it'll plug it in for us and allow us to, without us having to spend time researching. Even if it's slightly wrong, it's not going to be so off that, it's going to make a big difference. It'll give us a separate metric beyond just water use to say who's an outlier, right? Similar with houseboats. They sell those slips. It's public knowledge. We can see how many houseboats are within each of those 10 houseboat accounts to figure out, which are the outliers. And so this is, initially we were looking at water use, but now we're realizing we need to kind of, each of these separate classifications need potentially a separate metric that we're kind of digging into. So this initial pass was water use, and it's going to be a refinement over time, but wanted to share kind of where we're at. When we think about opportunities within this classification, we're really going to lean into the custom rebate within each of these, and that's what it was built for, is, for lodging, it's going to be your standard kind of residential fixture type items, but for others, it'll be more refined. We're also in conversations with San Quentin, recognizing that they have a really old water system there, potentially a lot of leaks or even known a lot of leaks. And so their rehabilitation folks, as part of the corrections team, is interested in having some of their inmates actually do some water monitoring and leak detection work. So that's kind of something they're really excited about, something we're really excited about. They can kind of get a hold of some of those leaks. That's great. Very exciting.
Are they still shutting the water off?
Still shutting the water off.
What I recall is they used to use the flushometer valves for sending Morse code, and they had shut the water off to stop that communications.
So what we did is we actually helped fund toilet replacements that limit the number of flushes they can use a day, which curbed that issue. And I didn't realize that was it, but we did incentivize work with them.
That's what it was for.
Yeah. So moving on to food sales and service subclassifications, we have restaurants, grocery stores, and specialty. So that would be your coffee shops, your ice cream shops, anything that's not a grocery store or a restaurant, essentially. And the range here is the low end of 0.54 acre feet is the specialty shops, and the highest range is the grocery stores. When we think about this, there are various different sizes of grocery stores. So maybe something like square footage would be something that we could utilize. And then within restaurants, that's almost 60% there. Is it a sit down? Is it a drive through, right? There's kind of further refinements. And as we kind of drill into these, but at this point, when you think about the number of accounts, the grocery store is only about 50 accounts. So it's something manageable for staff to look at and kind of refine. And so much easier than looking at, 3,500 CII accounts and trying to figure out, what direction we should go in for each of these. And I have the opportunities listed there as well for each of these. I will note that I mentioned last week that the conserved food defroster, we used this list to outreach to them. And we, like I said, in 2 weeks, we had 18 takers for those food defroster programs. So having this refined outreach really does make a difference. Moving on to healthcare, you can see the classifications here in hospitals is a major chunk of that water use. The low end here is our clinics, and the high end is actually assisted living. It's not even the hospitals. And you may think assisted living, maybe that should fall under the residential. There's actually a senior living category within the residential. This is more assisted living, like hospital type setting, assisted living. And we were able to kind of narrow that in and make the separation between those two types of uses through our research.
So those would be skilled nursing?
Yeah. And then we also have the opportunities listed here as well. And then finally, education. This is our fourth highest water user within those 22 categories would be education. A very small percentage of that is daycare, and the majority, which is the low end, and the high end is our schools. When we think about refining schools, we could do it public-private, we could do it by grade, we could do it by square footage. We're kind of still evaluating a lot of these different metrics that we could utilize. And some of our custom rebates that we're looking at is things like soil improvements for their functional turf areas, right? We think we can get some significant water savings through something like that through our custom rebate. So we have this analysis for all 22. I only want to show you the top 4, but within each one of them, we're kind of digging in and figuring out where we should be focusing as we move forward in this work.
I don't recall the houseboats ever being mentioned previously. It surprises me that they're separated into this group as opposed to being residential.
Yeah, that's just the way the account was established is, you think about an apartment or a multifamily housing situation, you have indoor and outdoor. This is primarily indoor. It's a fairly low percent of overall water use. It's only 4% of that lodging category. But when we think about how much water they're using, like what are the top 25% and what are those outliers? Where are the outliers? That's one of them that really stood out. So it'll be interesting to see.
I think the part that concerns me more is they escape the tiers by being in this category, at least partially.
Well, they still have tiers because they have a baseline and entitlement. So
But they don't have the 4 tiers.
They do not have 4 tiers.
And I'm wondering if that might, maybe if they're put in the group, they could be removed from the group.
Right.
Yeah,
it would be something that could be looked at. So when we think about water saving opportunities, I showed you the top 4 water using categories. We're definitely going to focus there, but we don't want to overlook some of the others as well, right? We feel like there could be opportunities throughout. I did want to provide an example of a group where we kind of looked and we can already see these outliers. I used fire departments. I feel that was kind of a safe comparison to make as opposed to any of the other subclassifications. And we can see here that the 2 in orange, they're located about 2 miles apart from each other in the same service area, very similar size, very similar square footage, yet their water use one is almost double the other. And so those are the kind of initial looks we're taking to figure out, where are those outliers and what can we do to work with them and let them know about the programs we offer and, opportunities to reduce use.
Did we only offer, I remember the washing the spray nozzles, that was only for restaurants,
Correct.
as I recall,
Well, it was anyone who uses a pre-rinse spray valve,
which are primarily the restaurants.
primarily restaurants. Yeah.
And then we changed the toilets in the restaurants.
Yes.
And that seemed to work pretty well. That idea of that we pay, we don't ask them, we ask them if it's okay, but then we do the work so that it gets done without any money out of their pocket. That seemed to be pretty well received,
Well,
as
it's
I recall.
free. Of course they would want that. Yeah. I think through our custom rebate program, those are going to be the opportunities. If toilets are what they need to change and it's a business, then we can quantify those savings and we can see what it would cost them, how much it would cost us, what's our contribution, and does it pencil out for both of us, right? And that's really where we're going to leverage this custom rebate, which is a new program we only launched just over a year ago.
And the 2 fire stations.
Yep.
Do they have a similar number of firemen?
We don't, so all we're using is readily available information, right? So
Square
with that,
footage.
right. So square footage was, but square footage is the, number of fire trucks, number of staff. We feel like it would be a fairly good comparison, at least from our initial pass. Yeah. So internally, we were establishing a goal of a 10% reduction in overall CI water use. As part of this evaluation, we want to set a metric that we can continue to track and work towards. So, it's not within the master plan. It's just kind of something separate that we've established.
Are you going to explain how you intend to accomplish that?
We're using 2025 as our baseline, and we'll look at 10% reduction over time.
Right. I understand that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is how?
No, I would say it's really a baseline for us now to put a stake in the
The goal.
ground. Yes, exactly.
Because it seems a little tricky to me, especially for someone like a restaurant.
Yeah.
It's possible, but there are different dishwashers and things like that,
Right.
but there's capital.
Right. Not a 10% reduction for every customer, just to clarify that. It's 10% reduction for the entire CII sector, right? So where are those sites that are inefficient, then we can get some traction on. If they're a restaurant and they have all the right hardware and they're doing a good job, then, pat them on the back and move on to someone else that.
Inefficient is an interesting word. How is that determined?
Right. So that's why we would look at something like a hotel, right? How many rooms do they have and what are those outliers? Is there a hotel that has similar number of rooms but has 3 times the water use? There's obviously something happening there that we could evaluate.
Similar, think of health clubs. You could have a huge health club with a big water use and a much smaller exclusive health club with also a large water use.
Sure.
So those are the sorts of, we don't know how ambitious this goal is or how well we may be able to meet it, but we wanted to put something out there as an initial target. So we'll
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just a little concerned about how to achieve it.
yeah. I mean, San Quentin could be, rich pickings. We know they have leaks. We know it's a very old system. It's just how practical is it for those to be addressed? The prison is built on very hard rock. So any, excavation for leaks is challenging out there. And so and then in terms of the daily operations of a prison and how you go about fixing interior leaks and tracking those down may be also very challenging.
Well, just the contracting side is difficult.
Yeah.
From both the risk and the reward.
Yep.
And then you have the state involved. What I recall with them is somebody in the state was pretty active in resisting our advances. They cooperated, but it's bureaucratic and in a lot of steps.
I'm shocked to hear that. But yeah, no, it'll be challenging in different ways with the different customers for sure, I think.
We also have to remember the state is establishing this similar, right? They're going to take those 22 categories and establish KPIs that we're going to be held to meeting once they figure out what those are going to be. And so this is just kind of moving us down that path, a step ahead of the state, which gives us a little bit of leeway.
One thing that's been kicked around with me is a small desal for San Quentin. It's interesting. They use enough water to make it I think it's in the feasibility range. I understand it may not be your side of the stick, but that's something I think we should at least give some thought to. They have some kind of intake pump station right there at the corner where you turn into the backside of the prison. And I don't know, if it's feasible or not, but it's kind of the package size.
Right.
This is great analysis. Thank you for doing this. I love the deep dive and figuring out where we can find savings, especially with comparable agencies like those two. Thank you.
And then, so just wrapping up with next steps. So we'll use this information for our targeting marketing programs by subcategory based on these custom benchmarking metrics. As they get established, we'll start rolling them out. We'll pursue and track our goal of 10% reduction in the CII sector. And then we also are looking at completing subcategories for dedicated irrigation meters. So Paul mentioned this is kind of an offshoot of the single family residential analysis we did. So now CII is, at the point where staff can kind of take it and run with it and get some good actions. But looking at dedicated irrigation meters, there's HOAs, there's schools, there's parks, there's multifamily, there's commercial, all these very different kinds of water use. So it's not just about square footage, but how are they using the water is something else that we feel like we can kind of further refine and then do targeted outreach to. So more to come on that.
Does it make sense to push them up in the AMI order?
Dedicated irrigation meters, they were
Well, more than that, they are probably already are.
number one. Yeah.
But the other side of moving them up in the sequencing for who gets AMI and when they get it, because it seems to me that, they actually have people that probably would pay attention to the results because it's bottom line.
I think that'd be something that we bring back to our AMI folks to consider.
Yeah. May not work, in the logistics, but
Happy to take any questions.
When do you think we'll hear back from the results of some of this work that you're doing? It sounds like it's an enormous amount of work. Is this a 3-month report back or 6 months or?
I would say at least 6. It's slow going, right?
Yeah.
It's getting to the right people
Right.
as well, and
You
doing.
need a staff of an army to get through it, but that's great. Okay. Yeah.
But we'll continue to track and report back on how it
Thank you.
progresses.
remember my famous saying, little steps for little feet. So, any step is a good step.
Quick question about the educational one. Some of the schools, especially around Los Colinas, Los Colinas Valley have recycled water to them. Are you counting that water use in your numbers as well?
So that's a good question. So this is, no, to answer your question, not included recycled water. This was our commercial, industrial, and institutional account. So no dedicated irrigation meters, no irrigation only meters were included in this analysis.
Okay.
Those were extracted, and that'll be part of our next step, which is potentially both potable and recycled, just because, it's water applied to a landscape. So how is it efficient or is it not, right? It's good information for us to know. So
Well, unless we're running up against, threshold with recycled water, I mean, it seems like we'd want to continue to encourage that use as opposed to try to go after to limit it. So
Yeah.
I think keeping it out of the original equation would be good.
Carrie, thanks a lot. This breakdown by category is really interesting. Your point that identifying areas that are potentially lower hanging fruit through this category analysis makes sense. You didn't give a timeline for achieving your 10% reduction, and I'm guessing that's something you're still working on. Any sense of where you're gonna land?
Annual reporting.
yeah, we'll do it as part of our annual reporting is tracking, what rebates did we give? Who did we work with? Are we actually tracking reductions in use or increasing efficiency on specific sites that we've worked with?
So we'll hear back.
You'll hear back. And I don't know about the time. I mean, it's like we were really surprised that we sent those letters out to the sites and you had 18 responses in a matter of 2 weeks, right? So some things it's just, like you said, low hanging fruit, and others are going to take building the relationship and, getting them on board and getting to the right folks. Is it the facility folks? Is it the owners property managers? Who is it to actually make the changes that we'd like to see? So it'll be a process.
How was the conference?
It was
The
really good.
Water Data Consortium.
Yeah, it was really good. And lots of opportunities and nice to hear what others are doing in that space and seeing how we can kind of follow their lead and learn from their experiences. It's good.
So you made your flight.
I did. Actually, it was delayed, so it was not even a rush.
And a quick turnaround for this presentation.
Let's go a little more firm than that. Why don't we set a date 1 year from today to have, let's see if we can achieve the 10%.
Yeah, I think, Director Russell, that's interesting. My sense is, setting it now in this moment, is a little rough, but certainly appreciate the comment of, okay, 10% without a date hardly feels like a goal. Kind of my thought would be to give Carrie some time as her and her team dig into this issue to get a better feel for what that date would be. But understanding that kind of next time there's a discussion on this item and update, there's an expectation to be thinking about that date, if that works for you, something like that.
Sure. On the other hand, of course, there's no downside to setting the date. In the sense that nothing happens if you don't achieve it. You just tell us it's not feasible.
We have a quarterly update on water efficiency, so it'd be great if you reported back next quarter
Yeah, that's another approach. Absolutely.
on what the timeline might look like.
So if that works for you, President.
Sure, it works for me.
Chair Russell.
Yeah, I'm easy going on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable if the category, this breakdown, this type of analysis is fairly recent, sort of thinking through how you then want to approach the different categories. I think giving some time for that process makes sense.
And, I would, the logic, I think, speaks for itself here that San Quentin is probably the real target, the whole assessment.
Help.
Because of the sheer volume. And what I recall is they were always pretty cooperative with at least the discussion. My concern is that it might take a year to get the meeting set with them.
We've had 3 meetings already, so there's interest. It's really going to come down to
Local or Sacramento?
Sacramento. It's really going to come down to safety and, what the tools that we think would really work for them require some GIS, right? And mapping
Sure.
and, they really want the inmates to be part of the process as part of their rehabilitation initiative. And they don't have staff to go out and do this, so it makes sense. So just kind of finding that safety, security, balancing those two interests, but they're definitely, they see that they've done the sustainability group within the prison system, corrections facility system has told us that they know San Quentin uses by far more water than other prisons and so
Yes.
they know there's something that needs to be done, and
Yes.
just trying to figure out what that right thing is what we're working through.
I didn't realize that. So even among prisons, they're an outlier.
It's pretty old.
Okay.
And the plumbing is complicated. The reason I chose desal over recycle is the last time I brought up the recycle idea, I was told that we would be sued by the prisoners union over that because it's a discrimination if only looking at them. On the other hand, that's fairly low-hanging fruit too, because they're right next to CSMA. And that might be something to look at. I know we had that one study, but I don't know if we limited it that much to just building something that would meet their needs.
Not from a DPR sense, yeah.
Yeah. It's a possibility.
Hmm.
Because, you could get your 10% in one shot, basically. Okay, public comment?
Yes, Bill Sauter, please.
Thanks very much for a really impressive and insightful presentation. This is the first time I've seen this information collected in one place, and I appreciate staff's respect for data and for using it to set performance goals. The goal of saving 10% of the 3780 acre feet used by CII customers means their conservation goal will be 378 acre feet. It sounds like this will be in addition to the 800 acre feet goal staff has set in last week's water efficiency plan. That means that these customers' goals are nearly half again as big as our current 800 acre feet goal. That sounds like a gratifyingly high goal, and it may well be realistic, as I think these CII users have not had their water use habits as well studied as the usage habits of other customers, and therefore have more potential for savings. I'm really looking forward to specific programs brought forward to help these users conserve. One of the things I find interesting is that this group of customers use almost as much potable water as our single-family residential users do for outdoor landscaping, about 4,000 acre feet. It's a significant opportunity for water savings, and I'm very appreciative that staff is treating it as such. In addition to its usefulness in conservation programs, this detailed look at our CII customers I think will also be very helpful at looking at rate setting and recycled water opportunities. I'm looking forward to seeing a map of the heaviest CII users of water overlaid on a map of our current and proposed recycled water networks. And I expect that this more detailed look at CII customers will help in upcoming rate discussions. I recall a time when we gave discounts to the heaviest summer users of outdoor potable water before we realized how counterintuitive that was and damaging to our water supply. It may be there are some legacy CII customers whose rates no longer reflect the true cost of supplying large amounts of potable water, for whom higher cost allocations will make sense. Again, many thanks for this look at CII customers. I hope it will find its way into perhaps Thursday's Finance Committee meeting and future board discussions. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Something I've noticed in restaurants is we used to have a card on the table. That seems to be disappeared. And they seem to hit you with water, which I would always ask for anyway, but they hit you with water whether you ask for it or not. So that might be one area where you can massage them a little bit for kind of, again, it's not so much the volume of water that's served, it's the cleaning part of it that racks it up. But that's one, it was funny. I was in Las Vegas with some friends from Texas, and they commented on the fact that there was no card in the bathroom of the hotel about water conservation. And Vegas is a little different because they define non-consumptive use as not a use, basically, conveniently. So, but, even folks from Texas recognize that water conservation is important. And that reminder that, water is available on request kind of thing, I think is a pretty cheap one to get the restaurants involved with. Okay, thank you very much.
The next item is my item on the grand jury update, grand jury report, and staff's draft responses, actually developed in conjunction with legal, providing a lot of support as we really thought about the best way to hit this. Backing up just a bit, every year, as you may know, there's the grand jury convenes in the county and they pick a topic. Often looking at prior reports to help, but nonetheless, often Marin Water's involved directly, indirectly, in some way, given our presence in the county in different ways. This year, as an attachment, we do have copies for anyone that doesn't have in front of you the attachments of the grand jury report and the draft responses as we go through it. So it was entitled Better Service at Lower Cost, Optimizing Essential Services for the Future of Marin, really targeting the very high number, uniquely high number of special districts throughout the county, more so in some areas than others, and we could get into that. The grand juries, it's a difficult job for citizens to do because they generally are tackling very big, complex topics with very little to perhaps no resources to support that other than what they're able to do themselves. you know, and to some extent, it's reflected here with absolutely no disrespect for the process or the individuals. This is a big, big topic. And there's a lot of different categories of special districts throughout the county. And we all have maybe a gut sense of, geez, do we really need this many? And, you know, with interviews apparently of different assorted folks, they reach some pretty strong conclusions and some pretty directive, maybe even unusually so, recommendations. So anyway, we are required per script to respond by a date certain, which is September 10th or 11th, I believe. And the format of our responses are also, you have limited choices of how you respond. So anyway, what I'm planning is to kind of walk through the responses. I think it'll go fairly quickly because they're sort of themed, as you'll see, as well as their recommendations. So if we move to that, unless there's any other questions on kind of the introduction. So on the draft, you know, F1, that's a first finding. So there's findings and then recommendations. And this really does start a theme. Current fragmented structure, special districts results in unnecessary duplication of administrative services and operational efficiencies, where I would say intuitively, of course, that has to be the case. Factually, it's hard to responsibly weigh in because we don't have unique knowledge necessarily of special districts where these efficiencies occur, nor was anything like that provided in the report. So disagree partially, indicating, hey, you may be on the right track, but, you know, as a public agency, we aren't just going to kind of throw an opinion that's unsupported. So that's kind of the approach as we go through it. The next one, F2.
Although
but
I think that could be just as easy, agree partially.
what's that?
I think our response could just as easily be agree partially.
Right, but that's not one of the available, and thank you for allowing me to do that. It's agree, disagree, or partially disagree
I see.
are the only options. But thanks for that clarification. And as you can see, I did try and go where I think generally the sentiment of the board may be that, yeah, this makes sense, but there's limits of going, you know, all in. F2, again, very similar, that some districts perform competently but lack sufficient scale to support long-term strategic investment in infrastructure, technology, staffing, and resilience, right? Seems like, yeah, of course, that's kind of a no-brainer, particularly with some very small districts in the county that do provide essential services like sanitary districts. Yet, I don't, you know, we don't have specific information on that. So, right, that's the theme. I won't keep repeating that. F3, here I did kind of go to agree, and I'll explain that. Smaller districts are disproportionately vulnerable to staffing disruptions and catastrophic events that could rapidly impair service delivery. I just lean towards agree, and it's probably debatable because it felt like when they're talking about catastrophic events, that's, you know, kind of an issue that rises up and should get probably some level of attention and more thought than perhaps inefficiencies. So that was kind of unique one where even though I don't have specific information, I felt I just wanted to kind of be a bit stronger on that one. F4, this one's pretty interesting, a very kind of political finding that although consolidation is popular among many elected members of government structures, absence of board member term limits, fear of loss of political influence discourage boards from initiating consolidation, even when they recognize its benefits. So again, kind of, yeah, I'm sure that takes place. In fact, personally seen it in a whole number of areas, yet not going fully there because don't have And there are, I mean, important other considerations, of course, that come into play in consolidation. That in many cases, I've seen good discussions that don't ultimately conclude in consolidation due to a whole variety of reasons that really seem to make sense. F5, service and pricing inequities could increase, disagree partially. Again, yeah, I mean, prices, there's inequities for a host of reasons. And I called out one, okay, two similarly sized sanitary districts, topography could drive inequities that have nothing to do with size necessarily. Performance metrics, which is F6, again, disagree partially. And I think, gosh, I just liked on all this, appreciated the positive intention of where the grand jury was going. This is, the idea of standardized performance metrics among for example, 20 sanitary districts in the county, would be just a Herculean effort, if possible, to achieve a result where the public could reasonably kind of compare performance based on those metrics. I mean, it's certainly the right idea, but really difficult. And you'll see in the recommendations, the timing for some of these, this one, I can't recall exactly, but it's probably this coming January, that kind of, whoa. But anyway, I did call out specifically in this one, just, kind of to own some of this, that Marin Water's among the highest in the region, if not the state, on the cost of infrastructure for the number of customers served, and explain that a little bit. Again, just trying to illustrate the complexity in the notion of standards and benchmarking that could reasonably apply across the board.
What does that mean? Planned or actual? How do you define
what I just said in terms of us?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just mean what exists in place. For example, the number of pump stations per capita
the dollars
is kind of, well, just the numbers off the chart.
Yeah.
So yeah, the cost burden to maintain and more so to replace them is, heavy for us relative to others that don't have the topography, may have far more economies of scale with population densities, as well as perhaps a different average age of their system.
Yeah, the one I remember is that East Bay Mud, we're very similar to number count, tanks and things like that.
Right, 10 times the size.
10 times,
right.
They're 10 times the population.
Exactly. And then lastly, for findings, F7, without proactive reform, any future consolidations likely to occur through crisis-driven intervention. Again, don't know that to be the case, although I sort of suspect that's accurate. And you do see consolidation occur. Most frequently, perhaps following a crisis or a big problem. Although, as I noted here, recently Central Marin and one of their tributary collection system agencies moved forward with a consolidation, just kind of based on, I believe, efficiencies and what made sense to their respective
I think the
governing
big
bodies.
one was the South Marin fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also Twin Cities police departments hooked together.
Yeah.
That was the two big ones. I have approached Belvedere and Tiburon to put the police departments together.
Right.
It's unbelievable, the resistance.
Yeah.
All from Belvedere. They're not interested at all in reducing costs.
Okay, moving on, no questions on the findings to recommendations. Again, kind of a theme here, a bit of a different theme I'll point out, and then just stop me if I'm moving too quickly. The first recommendation, again, by January 1st, all districts should have conducted their first semi-annual, again, saying semi-annual, consolidation exploration meeting. Keeley with similar districts and have established a regular meeting schedule moving forward. So, on this, I do in subsequent responses get a little more granular with these thoughts that some of the schedules is really simply impractical given kind of the complexity of these issues. And two, much of what they're asking takes more than just Marin Water to get it done. To schedule a meeting, we can't schedule a meeting ourselves with another agency, right? To talk about tough issues, just developing a schedule is going to take quite some time. So we really couldn't be as responsive as I'd like on the date that we'd be able to meet some of these recommendations. Although, I did feel important in a public document to note the positive aspects of our relationship with North Marin, the ongoing collaborations, the ad hoc that this board and their board recently set up to talk about furthering those connections and collaborative efforts. So the second recommendation by October 1, kind of actually 2026, and that's not a typo. The Board of Supervisors should direct the development of comprehensive, cost-efficient shared services, including a number of kind of interesting key areas. And then this would be made available for folks to tap in by this coming January. I did note that it's not appropriate for us to respond because that one's directly speaking to county activities. The date again is, to say it's aggressive is really a gross understatement. And will require some real resources, yet I do think, for Marin Water, it is an interesting concept, and we would support the effort in developing, what this concept ultimately looks like. Whether or not we participate in different areas, right, would be a future discussion with the board were this to actually move forward. The third recommendation, again, gets into, I was referencing it, the finding that led to this, the key performance indicators that are standardized and comparable among similar special districts. So that, I guess at the heart, not only would that be difficult, but it would require the participation and coordination of other agencies that we haven't yet engaged with as to their interests. So we couldn't put in a date like I would have liked to for something like this. R4, again, very similar theme, requires participation, so can't provide a date. The response requires further analysis is, again, we have limited ways we can respond. So it's one that kind of indicates, yeah, there's some work to do before we can, really hit a specific date. R5 is directly targeting the county, noting kind of the notion should oversee compliance, which may suggest, and Jared may know more than me, a level of authority the county would have in this that I don't think exists, which is, another issue where, things to move forward in this fashion.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The county has certain authority, but I think other special districts also have their individual authority that's not subject to the county's, jurisdiction on lots of areas.
So. R6, again, a bit aggressive as to the date and requires coordination with others. R7 is notably interesting. Again, a very kind of policy recommendation. Oh, no, we aren't there yet. Sorry. R7 is kind of really nice because we were specifically called out on in the attachment to the grand jury report as being kind of a best in case. in terms of our transparency, what's on our website in regards to board compensation, board policies, and the like. So thank you, Adrian, for that. Moving on, this was the one I got ahead of myself. All right, that's very policy heavy. And this one, yeah, is about all special districts should adopt term limits of 2 consecutive 4-year terms. This one, certainly, if the board wants a different response, please let me know. I sort of punted, but in terms of we would put this item on our agenda to discuss term limits by next January, just to give some time with the transition and just generally that this will take, I think, some thought among whatever current board members are here at that time. And then lastly, R9, again, similarly, that's completed and we were sort of recognized on where we are on that item. So that concludes the kind of presentation on this. Absent any, significant comments, but interested in any and all would be the next board meeting. We would bring this for the board to authorize me to sign off and submit it by the due date.
Questions?
Not a question, but I'm fully supportive of pursuing this work. I think it's important. I know it's happened in the past and tried to happen and then didn't happen.
Right.
So, on the one hand, it may be frustrating and feel like wasted time, but it just makes sense. So figure out who your partners can be from the other agencies who can do the right thing for our community. And maybe as you transition with Sean, this would be really important to get him fully up to speed because I know you've been deep in it for a long time. Also could be a good advisory role for you because this is really important work, but that transition to him will be super helpful. So thank you for doing it. I'm all supportive and good luck.
I thought, everything you put in your response was really interesting and helpful. And yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think, a lot of these kind of outside, loosely formed organizations that are really interested in saving water really want us to pursue regional partnership. So, and I realize that's a much more complicated issue than the report might recognize, but it would be great to keep moving towards that goal.
I support the response. I think it's interesting because from the outside looking in, this seems like a relatively simple concept. Let's just make it happen and go. But when you start opening up the hood and look underneath, the nuances is where it all starts coming out. And where I think you find the best success in making progress in this realm is baby steps, slowly sharing partnerships. And that's why I think the tact we're taking with North Marin is spot on, continuing to develop where we can partner, where we can save money, where we can have efficiencies. Because if not, at the end of the day, the bottom line is what really drives a lot of these decisions. And many times it doesn't pencil out based on the tact that people are taking in terms of all or nothing.
Yeah, I agree as well with your responses to the findings, Ben. Nothing to add there. And as is noted, getting a process moving with North Marin at least is already underway. And continuing along that road makes a lot of sense. So thank you.
I congratulate you on your sensitive wording in the response, because these get published in the back of the grand jury report. So North Marin will see every word we write. I have a question. Do we have the ability to limit terms?
Yeah, so Molly and I were actually discussing that, and we think probably what would likely happen, and more research to come on this, is that the board would take up an item, they would discuss it, and if there was an interest in this, it would probably be a voter initiative that would actually approve that. It is the process that we believe would be required. We're going to have to dig into it a little bit more. I think like charter cities, for example, have more flexibility on those things. But I think as a special district like here,
Yeah, it doesn't
Um,
seem to be something we have
yeah.
the power to do. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what elections are, is term limits.
It's,
Um,
and it's interesting that term limits have been included in consolidation. That I don't really understand, but
Well, what I've been told over the years being here is that the biggest resistance to all of this is the electeds. That they, at least that's the perception of the public. Whether that's exactly true or not, I don't know. But that is where they anticipate the resistance coming.
Yeah, in my experience, that is what I've seen, along with sometimes generated by electeds and sometimes in its own, is the notion of kind of the loss of local control
Mhm.
of the smaller district and some kind of.
it's just a note on this. Sorry, Matt, because in Ross, the elected all unanimously approved the consolidation of their fire services, basically shutting down their fire
Yes.
station. And there was a voter revolt against that, which is now forcing them to reconsider. And it's not a pretty process, but it's actually the opposite of what is. But that's different. These are town managed services
Right.
versus special districts.
Although from my limited understanding of the fire situation, it has gone down fairly well.
It has, but usually there's not as much resistance to release control of fire as there is law. And so I'm not surprised at all that people are going to pay for their own police department, because giving up that local control is much different than the fire side. But there's a lot of other components of that, and I think the one thing we forget, I think, does start with the electeds in terms of potential resistance. But the labor groups, when you're looking at compensation packages, could be very different.
Sure.
And squaring that round peg is not an easy challenge.
Yeah, the police situation in the peninsula is very interesting. Tiburon has 7 police cars 24 hours a day. Belvedere has 4. So we have 11 police cars 24 hours a day patrolling 77 miles of road. Plus we have sheriffs, plus we have CHP. So, it's like we got a lot of cops. And like I said, the pushing in, because it made perfect sense to me, and it just was complete blowback from Belvedere. They're not interested at all in that. The one area that seems to me to be very subject to this, and I think we could actually take a leadership role in this, is consolidating the wastewater groups. Now, they may be very big pushback on some of those. But I don't know, that one seems that they seem to have cleaned up their acts. They were in the newspaper constantly, and when they're not in the newspaper anymore. One more comment on term limits. Mill Valley has some kind of an unofficial term limit of 2 elected terms for city council and things like that. But the only person that I've ever heard that violated it was Dick Spotswood, who ran for 3 and was elected for 3. So that was kind of funny that, that was the unofficial, that was there as a policy kind of, but not really. It was written, but not in a enforceable manner. And that's the thing I can see is, I can see people going, unless, a voter change, that's an interesting concept, expensive and difficult. But
I keep hearing how Mill Valley is the best run municipality in the county. Maybe that's why.
Where do you live?
okay, cool. Thank you very much. Great job.
There are no public comments.
Thanks. Okay. Well, our next meeting is September 22nd. And we'll see you then. Adjourned. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.